Right, this is called The Art of Class War. This is a rugby league article about Peter Blandis. Takes in Murdoch and Packer in the latest monthly, August monthly. The Art of Class War. Now, decades after Murdoch and Packer destroyed the popular appeal of a game created for the masses, Peter Blandis is putting rugby league back on top. Is he though? We'll see. Survived COVID, is doing well. Essay by Lech, Blaine. This goes for about 10 pages. I'm going to read a few pages, that's all. Peter Blandis is a man with a plan to make Australia sane again. A man with a plan to make Australia sane again. I don't know if we're ever that sane. His straightforward vaccine for the financial stress and social isolation of COVID-19. His greatest game of all, rugby league, which with his unapologetically bogan persona, he pronounces rugby league, a surefire source of amusement for some southerners. Australian without rugby league is not Australia, declared Blandis at a press conference on March 14. Blandis is a freshly crowned chairman of the sports governing body, the Australian Rugby League Commission, as well as the long-serving chief executive of Racing New South Wales. Is the twang more associated with tradies, the legacy of a working-class upbringing in the Wollongong, with migrant parents from the Greek island of Kythera, where his grandfather rode a donkey for a living? Yeah, that's what it says. His grandfather rode a donkey for a living. In Australia, his parents worked 12-hour shifts and personally skipped meals to put food on the table for 3 kids. As a tribute to his blue-collar roots, Blandis dresses like a suburban justice of the peace who stumbled into the Supreme Court with scuffed shoes, boot-cut trousers and untucked shirts. A subtle fuck you to the establishment he keeps running rings around. The concern, I'm not sure if someone involved with New South Wales racing is really all that honest or trustworthy. That's my opinion. Anyway, the concern I have, says the league chairman, is most people are being affected by mental illness, or more people are being affected by mental illness than by the coronavirus. This isn't Blandis' first rodeo or indeed his first public relations campaign triggered by a plague. In the dying month of John Howard's political supremacy, the little-known racing executive sought to rescue the industry from equine influenza by seeking $110 million bailout. He got $235 million. His style of megaphone negotiation also clinched another $42 million sweetener for Racing New South Wales when the Catholic Church, led by the Archbishop of Sydney, George Powell, wanted to use Randwick Racecourse for Pope Benedict's visit on World Youth Day in 2008. Mr. Powell is a bully, Blandis said at the time. He's refused any meeting with us because he's realised he's not in a position of strength, because he's forcing his strength on someone who doesn't want to comply. The wins kept coming with Racing New South Wales. He took gambling companies to the High Court and received an estimated $1 billion dividend over a decade. Then used the influx of money to launch an all-out war on Victoria, the superpower of Australian racing. There you go. It's about 10 pages. I'm going to read a couple more pages. That's it. Long story short, Blandis masterminded the richest turf horse race in the world, the Everest, to occur on the same day as Melbourne's Caulfield Cup. Victoria was home to the most dreary city on earth with the worst weather. He complained to the Daily Telegraph, yet New South Wales bows and scrapes it all the time. Not anymore. The inaugural $10 million Everest race in 2017 was a smash hit, attracting 35,000 fans and more than $50 million in gambling revenue. To coronate his success, Blandis attempted to use the Sydney Opera House as a billboard to launch the second year. A public outcry was led by 9 newspaper columnists and popular historian Peter Fitzgerald, prompting a petition signed by 300,000 people. Fitzgerald grew up on Orange Orchard before boarding at Sydney's prestigious Knox Grammar, sitting on the lounge of his North Sydney home with panoramic views of the dust-lit harbour. He's apoplectic. To put fucking bet ads on it, he says of Blandis' plan to project promotions onto the Opera House. This is a desecration of work of art. Well, yeah, I suppose he's right. Fitzgerald had a point, eh? According to Blandis, The saturation negativity from Sydney's loud elites provides 25 million of free PR, public relations or promotion, for the Everest, leading to a record crowd in 2018 of 40,578, with betting revenue exceeding $100. $100 million. He declared that the Melbourne Cup, held on the first Tuesday of November for 150 years, should be rescheduled to accommodate racing in New South Wales. Victoria's racing boss, Amanda Elliott, a Melbourneian from Old Money, called Blandis a silly man with a silly little plans. Blandis told me the success of the Everest didn't eradicate classist assumptions about his competence as a sporting official. No matter what results you get, he says, they will underestimate you, because you're not a private school kid, you're this little migrant kid from Wollongong. Rugby League's patron saint of class warfare is respected journalist Roy Masters, the former high school teacher who became the Shakespeare quoting coach of Western Suburbs Magpies in 1978. He dubbed his team the Fibros, the material used to build the council houses he passed on the way to training from Penrith, while nicknaming rival North Shore glamour team Manly Warringah Sea Eagles the Silvertails. Yeah, they're the money team. Manly, well hated in Sydney. I want you to show 2 million people out there that rugby league was born in the western suburbs, not on the beaches, said Masters in a profane pre-game. Even though most of the Sea Eagles players were themselves working class fibros, the rivalry worked because most Magpie players lacked the amenities provided by intergenerational wealth. Masters' approach sparked a series of violent encounters between the sides, resuscitating the underdog Magpies into temporary contenders, who won the minor premiership in his first season as coach. Today the game he loves is once again being run by someone who grew up in a fibro home. Flanders is instinctively rugby league, Master tells me. We've reverted back to a street fighter from the wrong side of the tracks. Well done for Peter Blandis. His capacity to ruffle the feathers of aristocrats made him the dream candidate to run a game historian Andrew Moore called the opera of the proletariat. There you go. I'm going to skip a couple of things because we'll never get to the end of it. It's 10 pages long. Skip a bit. Go over to this. It says, March 14, 2020, Australia is suffering from a collective panic attack, but Blandis doesn't stutter. The emergencies that normally people dread are his bread and butter. Everyone's panicking, rah, rah, rah. And then it says, the NRL is bucking a pattern of administrative self-immolation, which means not doing good things to yourself. Blandis has spent years preparing for the challenge of running a sporting empire during COVID-19. He jokes he will start by asking the Prime Minister for 500 million. Well, he should. Given his record on that front, nobody is laughing. He demands a stimulus package commensurate with the antidepressant value that televised football has for its working class fans. Just trying to get this magazine in the right spot. Rugby league has been a fabric of our society for hundreds of years, he said. It's people's escape, it's people's relaxation. After the press conference, Flanders is accused of hyperbole for treating sport with life or death importance during a pandemic, but none of his key constituents within the league community doubt their leader's sincerity. Phil Gus Gould, a personal confidant to Flanders, captained the Penrith Panthers at the age of 20, coached the Bulldogs to a premiership at the age of 30, and the Panthers to their first premiership at the age of 33. He remembers seeing fans in Panthers jerseys wander around the streets of Western Sydney like zombies during pre-season. They're lost because the football's not on, Gould tells me. It holds their families together. People don't understand that their life begins in the second week of March and ends in October. It's a bit sad, but there's some reality there. I enjoy watching the footy myself. We'll skip a couple of pages. It's a couple of paragraphs. Rugby league was the bastard child that got away from rugby union, says Peter Beattie, the former Labor Premier of Queensland, and Volandi's predecessor on the chairman of the ARL Commission. It really fitted within that whole Ned Kelly psychology of rebellion. Peter Fitzsimmons, a former Australian Wallabies rugby union player, was coached by Tony Abbott at Sydney University and Alan Jones at Manly Rugby Union Club. He mourns the loss of the romance, the chivalry, the poetry, when Unity finally went professional in 1995. Traditionally, rugby union was for the masses to run around. He says not to make money. The whole raison d'etre of rugby league was making money out of playing football. Motivated by feeding their families, the blue-collar league revolutionaries also simplified union's rules about rucks and scrums to encourage a more eye-catching, therefore popular and profitable spectacle, while a try scored in the rival codes appears identical to the untrained eye. Fitzgerald insists there is something inherently more pleasurable about the climax of a union game. He delivers a commentary from the famous play by Wallabies David Campese. I likened it to one of my columns to orgasms, he adds with sincerity, before miming a man at the moment of ejaculation and howling with pleasure. Got it. It's looming. It's long. Rugby league, he just bursts through and scores. Sydney's early 20th century bourgeoisie media predicted a quick death for the more down-to-earth rebel code. Yet league was stunning success largely because there were more Peters in City of the Blandis rather than Fitzsimmons variety. Yeah, I'm with the Blandis variety, not the stuck-up private school guys. Anyway, in cutting loose from the upper class, rugby league presented fewer barriers to all comers, such as Indigenous athletes, where rugby union never grew significantly enough outside of the elite private schools system of Sydney and Brisbane. Rugby league was a game founded on the principle of equality, historian Tony Collins explains. The emphasis on merit meant that racial barriers did not carry the same weight in the game as they did in other more socially conservative sports. According to ARL Commission member Megan Davis, a proud cobble woman from regional Queensland, rugby league's relative lack of discrimination was created by class solidarity between black and white players. Davis is the Blaine Chair in Constitutional Law and Pro-Vice Chancellor at University of New South Wales, and has researched the unsung history of Aboriginal men from Queensland missions and receiving special permission to play rugby league on weekends. The connection to rugby league within Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities is visceral. She tells me league offered hope and freedom for so many blackfellas during the most draconian periods of racial segregation. Rugby league's most celebrated forward is Queenslander Arthur Beetson, whose mother was a member of the Stolen Generations. In 1973, Beetson made history by becoming the first Aboriginal captain of a national sporting side. Rugby league has played a massive role within the Aboriginal community, says Jonathan Thurston, who cites Beetson as a big inspiration for league's present-day melting pot of cultures. The game has given so much. Thurston is the pin-up boy for league's commitment to rehabilitating players with behavioural issues. The son of an Aboriginal mother and Kiwi father, he was raised in Sunnybank, a low socio-economic area on the fringe of Brisbane, that's South Brisbane. During adolescence, JT overcame flirtations with substance abuse and petty crime to taste a dream of sporting career, who most scouts believed was destined for failure, but he became one of the biggest legends in Queensland Rugby and Australian Rugby League, Queensland Rugby League, legend of the state of origin, etc. Cowboys player, now retired. He learnt more about his Aboriginal ancestry via the NRL's Indigenous All-Star Games, which he tells me was a missing jigsaw piece of a newfound wisdom. Post-retirement, he started the JT Academy, a platform to promote school attendance and employment opportunities with underprivileged communities. I've been where these kids are, he tells me. In 2015, JT won his 4th Daly M medal, for Best NRL Player of the season, before captaining the Townsville North Queensland Cowboys to their first premiership and winning the Clive Churchill Medal for Man of the Match. He was photographed in an iconic post-game hug with his daughter while she gripped a dark-skinned doll, at the same time that the AFL was grappling with the booing of Adam Goodes. In 2020, the Cowboys unveiled a statue of Thurston at their new stadium. He still can't fathom the difference between the treatment he and Goodes received from their respective sports. I'm speechless when I think of why, he says. I guess rugby league is a working class game. Nobody is better than anyone else. By 2018, Thurston's final season, 12% of NRL players identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander compared to 3.3% of the 2016 national census. Players of Pacific Island ancestry made up 45% of NRL squads, while comprising 0.88% of the population. Anglo players are now within the minority. Rugby League has a long history of leading Australia when it comes to bringing the rights and voices of marginalised groups to the forefront of sport, Davis says. She laments the game's radical history of embracing Indigenous players and supporters is underappreciated by a southern media that paints Aussie rules as Australia's native sport and rugby league as a cultural backwater. Blackfellas have been a very visible feature of rugby league's architecture since it arrived here, Davis tells me. It's an extraordinary part of the Australian story that doesn't get much recognition because everyone's too busy running the NRL down. Look, I'm going to have to I might do another video on part 2 and read a couple more pages. Thanks for listening. Please share and follow Stephen Lewis Whale on Facebook. Stephen with PH, Lewis, Whale, Whale. Thank you.